All right, take two on this. My first shot at this unboxing video for the John Bauer deck did not work out because my tablet ran out of memory. So we're trying again with another video format, basically my cell phone. But this is the John Bauer Tarot deck, which I pre-ordered a number of months ago. Um, and it just arrived in the mail yesterday, so I wanted to wait to unbox it until I had an opportunity to do this little video. John Bauer was a really well-known Swedish illustrator from around the turn of the previous century. So he was working in the early 1900s primarily. He would have been a contemporary of Pamela Coleman Smith, who did the Rider-Waite deck. And so there may be some similar feeling to sort of the type of symbolism that's in this deck. But anyway, let's take a quick look at it. The first thing I noticed right off the bat is that there is no written title for each card. Everything is numbered or has a small symbol if it happens to be in one of the suits. And then hopefully the imagery itself will describe the card well enough, in addition to the information of the number, that you know what card you're looking at. On a brief glance at this, as I was trying to do the first video, I would not call this a beginner deck. The imagery is a little bit more of a challenge. It's not as standardized as the Rider-Waite Smith deck that we're also familiar with. And so to some degree, there's a lot more room for interpretation, for intuition. And of course, if you're an experienced reader, that can be a very good thing. I would almost use this perhaps more as an oracle deck. But let's go through and take a look. The cardstock is thin-ish. It's not what I would consider a high-end deck. It comes in a Los Scarabos basic box. There wasn't anything special or precious about the packaging on this particular one. It's pretty standard. This is the image from the back of the card as well, which I actually really like. I like the red and the pale creamy green. And that is the backs on all of the cards. And of course, this would be the Fool, which we've been looking at for a minute here now. But like I said, these images are not what I would call traditional or standard. This would be the Magician. And it's just a funny little creature. Kind of reminds me of some of the Jim Henson creatures, some of his movies. Very unusual. A lot of these are based in mythology. Again, because of the time frame, very related to the work of the Symbolist, which was an art movement of that time frame. This would be the High Priestess. Now, of course, John Bauer never created a tarot deck. He created a large body of illustrative work, and this deck is very simply someone intuitively taking his imagery and assigning them to tarot imagery and to tarot cards. So there really is going to be more variation in these. But again, I think it leaves you wide open to a lot more interpretation and intuition. This, of course, would be the Empress and the Emperor. Although that very standard four square, emperor on his throne is very much evident in this. However, this is the Hierophant, and very, very, very different. This stone creature, I would presume, represents the Hierophant, and then these two children could be, the figures that are normally sitting at the Hierophant's feet. And of course the lovers, they're usually quite easy to figure out. But you can still see some relationship to the era, the time period of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, even though this is much more detailed illustration. There's a nostalgia for earlier time periods that was very common for that period of time. The Chariot. And again, I think these images would give you entirely new meanings for the cards, or at least shifts in the direction of the meaning of the cards. Because this child on this kind of ram type creature with this heavy burden would carry a lot of different meanings than your traditional chariot rider with his, his two steeds, or sphinxes, as the case may be. Strength, which does have a lot of similarity to the traditional strength card. Now here's where one really goes off. This would be the Hermit card, and I can definitely relate the candlelight to the traditional hermit. But this young woman, this young long-haired, not even a young woman, she's a child. And I think of this in terms of Christmas imagery. But she is meant to represent the Hierophant, which is maybe, not the Hierophant, excuse me, the Hermit. She's meant to represent the Hermit, which is confusing because this gentleman right here might appear much, much more like a hermit. But this card represents the Wheel, which is this funny little circle of almost little bodies that go around him. So again, a beginner might struggle with this, especially if they're trying to work with more traditional imagery to start. So I would definitely put this in the hands of more experienced tarot readers or somebody who works almost more completely intuitively. And again, the numerology can be helpful. But a lot of this is quite different. I believe, is that Judgment, perhaps? I'll actually have to look. And the Hanged Man, which has a young lady, again, almost Rapunzel-like, leaning down out of a tree. So there's lots of new ways to interpret these. Death. So a very untraditional image for death. Temperance? Temperance. And the Devil. He's a little easier to recognize. And the Tower. The little bolt of lightning's a bit helpful for that. But again, you've got this young figure looking up at the tower as opposed to the falling figures. So, definitely some opportunity for new interpretations. And the Star with a masculine image as opposed to the feminine one we're used to. And the Moon. Anyway, I love the imagery. I'm all about the illustration. And the Sun. I think the imagery is beautiful. Judgment, fairly easy to interpret. I like the possible dimension of the flock of sheep added to this, though. Again, there's another level of symbolism that can be picked up there. And the World. So that brought us to the end of the major arcana, or arcana, as you prefer to say. And into the suits. And I think the suits are probably going to be, we'll be lucky if they really seem to make much sense at all. The Ace of Cups, and you know that this is a cup because of the symbol at the bottom. And there is water, and of course, cups do represent emotion, and so the water relates to that. Although being an ace, this image is a little more of a challenge to kind of come up with. Of course, aces also indicate new beginnings, as well as sort of all of the qualities of their suit. But this is not what I would consider a traditional image for an Ace of Cups. This can be fine for a Two of Cups. A very different one for Three of Cups, which is usually a circle of young women holding their glasses high, celebrating. This has a very different feel to it. Four of Cups, though, has some similarity. So anyway, I will just kind of breeze through these rather than analyzing every single one, because some will seem obvious and others will feel quite different. This one's a little hit and miss for me on Seven of Cups. This has a higher fear factor than sort of the indecision or the grouping of choices that is typically a Seven of Cups. Eight of Cups, also quite different. 9. Wow. Very different. And 10. All right, the court cards are indicated by a little symbol at the top. So this would be the Page of Cups. And I'm not absolutely certain who the page is in this particular image. It could be one of these two characters, but I tend to think it might be intended to be this large, funny, giant, duck-like character who seems to be on a journey. Again, this is a very unusual one for cups, for the page. And of course, there's another figure right behind him. So yeah, you definitely some different interpretation. Now I could almost see this is the Knight of Pentacles, but this is the Knight of Cups. Maybe it's because his horse is white, but looking out over the field with this sturdy draft horse makes me think of the Knight of Pentacles. So you'll really have to pay attention to the symbolism that's there so that you don't get them confused. And this would be the Queen. So this funny little symbol here represents the Queen and the King. I kind of like this king, an older king followed by a child. He seems sweet. And now we're into Pentacles. So again, I'll not analyze every single one of these. We'll just go through them. But you can see that there's quite a variety of imagery that will require interpretation and thought. So I can absolutely see using this more as an oracle deck with an understanding of the traditional meanings, and then overlay new meanings from these images. So this is the Knight of Pentacles. Interesting to have this monk's figure as the knight. Oh, take that back. That's the page. Excuse me, page. That's the Page of Pentacles. We just dropped the 10. This was the 10 of Pentacles, which we think of as being that big family scene with the castle in the background. Some of this imagery is a little darker. So this is the Page of Pentacles. Of course, he doesn't seem like a very young character, but that's quite all right. And see, I can see this. I really liked that Knight of Cups for the Knight of Pentacles, and I can see this as perhaps being the Knight of Wands or Swords, but let's move on and see what those guys look like. The Queen. Ah, there's the Queen. I was confused by these funny little creatures. I have to imagine that a lot of Jim Henson's characters were inspired by John Bauer's work. I just have to imagine that it was, because there's so much similarity. Okay, here we are into Wands. There's some good similarity for this card between the traditional images. But again, because these were never intended as tarot imagery, they were just chosen for having some kind of relationship that could be interpreted to fit each card. And the lovely thing about symbolism is that there are thousands of potential meanings for many symbols, and it's up to you to intuit a correct meaning to create the storyline that the tarot reading has to tell. And I'm afraid that this is going on and on. There's the Page of Wands, the Knight of Wands. So I could see him maybe being Cups. But that's just my opinion. And as long as you're following the suit information, you'll be fine. The King of Wands. He feels a little constipated to me. And finally, the Swords. And Swords are sort of that challenging suit, so I can feel the Four of Swords in this image. I really can. That's interesting. So, I'll breeze through these. Also, Nine of Swords feels very evident here. I hope that this was interesting for you and can help you decide whether or not this is a deck you would like to potentially work with. I don't think that I will use this for the vast majority of my readings, but I do think I would love to keep it as almost more of an oracle option, and certainly as a reflective deck for me personally when I'm doing personal readings. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this, the new John Bauer Tarot by the now deceased early 20th century artist John Bauer, and produced by Lo Scarabo. Have a great day.